On this week's episode of the Crushing Debt Podcast, financial therapy. So, welcome back to this week's episode of the Crushing Debt Podcast. My name is Shawn Yesner, owner and founder of Yesner Law, and I am joined remote. I don't get to see him live and in person, but he is here remote. Your financial coach, George Corbello. How you doing, George?
I'm doing well. Happy days, and doing extremely well here. And just ready to go again, dude. All about the house. I'm gonna bore people with the house itself. So they did the appraisal, right? And you look at the pictures in the appraisal, and it looks like there's no garage door. There's no there's no concrete on the floor. It's like, okay, this thing is, we're closing in 2 weeks. I'm like, good, and I don't think that's happening, but it's amazing how they'll tell the loan officers and these guys where we're at. So it's kind of funny, but very exciting.
You haven't ever seen, there's the meme out, and it says what you think your house is, and it's got a reasonable looking house.
Yeah.
And it says what the property appraiser thinks your house is, and it shows like a mansion with 15 bedrooms and 10 bathrooms.
Exactly.
And it says, what the appraiser thinks your house is, and it shows like an outhouse. And have you seen that meme yet?
I gotta say, that's I'm at the let's go with the lowest value you can make, please. That'd be awesome.
Well, luckily we have a guest on the show today that can maybe put your mind at ease about some of this stuff. But before we get to her, real quick, I want to mention two things. First is our sponsor, Sam Cohen. He owns Attorneys First Insurance. Those of you that are longtime listeners, I talk about him almost every week. He owns Attorneys First. They write errors and omissions coverage or malpractice coverage for attorneys and title companies all over the country. So if you're an attorney, if you're a title company, you have questions about E&O coverage, malpractice coverage, what you have, what you should have, Sam can give you an apples-to-apples comparison. He can even write coverage if you happen to have had an oopsie and a claim in the past. I also wanted to promote again, as this episode comes out, I am preparing. Thank you, George, for your help last week and helping me to prepare for the More Entrepreneur Summit 2023, which is going to be December 8, 2023. It is all online. It's all virtual, hosted by our friend Tiffany Kellogg. I'll be speaking there about technology tips to help you save money. There's still an opportunity to get tickets if you're interested in that. I'll put the link in the notes here so you can click on my link and pick up your tickets there. So what we wanted to talk about this week, so I guess it's no secret, George and I met through BNI, through a networking group. BNI is a group that I've been involved in for a long time, fantastic networking group. We got another introduction through BNI. So our guest this week is a member of the Mainline Virtual Chapter in Pennsylvania. She's been a PhD in psychotherapy for over 30 years. She's passionate about helping folks put their minds at ease during stressful financial situations. She knows exactly what that's like from firsthand experience in the 2000 stock market crash. As a result, she transformed her practice to helping folks in similar situations to understand and change their feelings and behavior about money so that they can get back to living a fulfilled life and enjoy the money that they have. Welcome our guest this week, Dr. Maggie Baker. Welcome, Maggie.
Thank you very much. I'm very, very happy to be here, and I hope I can impart some wisdom about people's relationship to money that will ease their mind, even in a half an hour.
Well, you're certainly a lot smarter than George, and probably a lot smarter than me as well. So I did want to give out real quick, your website is maggiebakerphd.com. And then I also saw you wrote a book called Crazy About Money. And so there's a link on the website to get that book, or you can go directly to the book site, which is crazyaboutmoney.net. I didn't look, but I assume is the book also available like on Amazon and the other major outlets?
It's on, Amazon Kindle, and I finished an Audible edition that I narrated myself, and you can get that from my website, which will actually send you to Amazon to get it.
Okay, very nice. So
yes,
I guess the first thing. So I know we were talking pre-recording, and you were dealing with a couple that had some bankruptcy questions. So I don't know if you want to go over that, or If you want, I want to get some more information about the book. I want to get some more information about what you do and how you do it. So, what would you like to address first?
Well, let's address what I do and how I do it, and then it'll have a better context for to talk about the bankruptcy case, which I am fascinated by and eager for your advice.
Okay, sounds good. So, I guess the first thing, and kind of from a layman's perspective, the difference between what psychotherapy, um, so you've got a psychotherapist, you've got a counselor, you've got what are the different designations within that profession. I mean, you've obviously got a PhD, so you've reached the top of the profession. But what's the difference there between a psychotherapist, a psychiatrist? What are the differences there?
Oh, okay. Well, let's start with the psychotherapist. Usually, at least in Pennsylvania, where you have to be licensed in order to practice, people who call themselves psychotherapists usually have a master's in psychology, but not a PhD. Now,
Okay.
some PhDs call themselves psychotherapists just because it's a familiar term and they don't want to scare people with, oh, she's a doctor and she's had massive training, and that's intimidating. So psychotherapist, I think, is less intimidating. And counselor is different in that people who call themselves therapists study pathology. They study things, disorders and extremes. And people who are trained as counselors tend to look at normal development and do things to support and affirm normal development. But there isn't a strong, quote, pathology that they're looking at. Or if they're looking at it, they probably have a different reaction to it, like, oh, this is too much for me. I think I'll send it to, a psychologist, a PhD, or a psychotherapist. And a psychiatrist, and my late husband was a psychiatrist. We had a practice together, and goes to medical school and then does a residency in psychiatry, which takes 2 to 3 years, and then goes out and practices. And when I was coming up, psychiatrists did a lot of talking therapy, but as drugs developed and became more and more effective, and this is about the 80s or 90s, then there was a tremendous, and also with the advent of managed care, the psychiatrists shifted much more to just giving medication. And some of them did talk therapy, but the split now is pretty wide. And most people who do talk therapy go to a psychologist, psychotherapist, or counselor. And the people who really need medication go to a psychiatrist. And even if you need medication for ADD or ADHD, you still probably would not talk to a psychiatrist. They'd send you to a psychologist.
So, talk therapy is, I guess, what I would imagine. You go in and you lay on the couch and you talk to the counselor, right?
Well, that's changed. Freud is out, and behavioral evidence-based treatment is in. And what people mean by evidence-based is that there have been studies that have been replicated by and put in top journals that say that, for instance, cognitive behavior therapy has good effects. Now, that's wonderful, except that a lot of people will say, okay, we've got an evidence-based treatment, but the treatment is it's so narrowly defined, because when you do a study, you want to be able to control all the variables. And you can do that when you get people coming in and you have a manual that kind of cookbooks the responses to the person. You get good results, but it's like, if you have a smashed up leg, it's like oh, I think I'll just look at the ankle.
Yeah.
You want somebody who's going to look at the whole leg and how the leg fits in with the body and the repercussions of all of that. And if you try to do a study on the whole body and somebody's smashed up leg, you're going to have all kinds of technical problems with the structure of the study. So people are really not able to do that.
Man, I mean, there's a lot involved in regards to that, and I'd imagine how do clients like find you? Why do they come to you in regards to that? Because I think I hear all those credentials and I get nervous, and we're talking just money. I mean, I know I'm crazy, but when it comes to money, there's something that's very specific. How do clients really find you, and what kind of support are they going to look to get from you when it comes to the finances?
Well, first of all, they're going to get a huge warm welcome, because anybody who is willing to talk about their finances to a veritable stranger has got real guts, as far as I'm concerned, because finances are very intimate, and people's personalities and emotions and attitudes and beliefs are all wound in a taboo subject. It's money has been a taboo subject socially for decades, and so we're having to break down a lot of barriers, and that's one of the reasons I want to be a guest on your podcast, because I want to tell people, I'm not there to judge them. I'm not there to intimidate them. I'm there to deeply understand what their beliefs are about money, and how their beliefs and their attitudes and their emotions may, like many, many people, play into not doing themselves favors with money. And that if I can unwind them from some of their deeply held half-truth beliefs, then that will promote their empowerment. And nothing makes me happier than seeing somebody empowered with their money situations, no matter how bleak they feel it may be, because there's always a way to fix it.
Well, and I guess that was going to be kind of my question, is that if somebody has a money belief, can it be changed, or how difficult would it be to change?
Well, yeah, and let me just circle back and say how people find me is usually people who have worked with me or colleagues who know me, refer people.
Right.
People going to my website, they can get to me. What I will say is that most of the time it takes a real crisis in somebody's life to push them to look around and, ask or keep their eyes open for somebody that could help them. Now, let me give you an example of how it works. And I think being entrepreneurs, this I hope will help you understand. There was a guy who grew up with a scarcity mindset, with that feeling that there's never going to be enough. It also translates often from a kid's perspective into, I'm not enough if there's not enough for me.
Yeah.
And he hated feeling that way as a kid, a 7 or 8 year old. And he made a vow to himself that he was going to be rich when he grew up, because he didn't want to live with that scarcity sense in his gut. So he grows up, he becomes an entrepreneur, he starts a business, and he struggles and he struggles. And finally, the business starts to really take off. But as it starts to take off and scale up, something happens inside him, and he starts feeling bored, doesn't want to go, because it's just the same old, same old. And so he starts a second business. And as he starts a second business, of course, what happens to the first business? Yes.
Yeah.
And he's really panicked because his conscious mind of, I'm going to be rich, is not happening. And so he comes to the therapist, and they start working. And what they uncover is that his deeply held childhood half-truth belief was once poor, always poor.
Yeah.
That's called a money script. And that was so dominating his behavior as an adult, even though it wasn't true, it was true to his unconscious. And when he became aware that he was working on that old sense of scarcity, he was able to see what his behavior was doing to himself, and he got freed from it. He shut down the second business, put himself wholly into the first business, because now he was free to be rich. And he worked at it, he scaled up, and in fact did very well, and was absolutely free from that horrible feeling of there'll never be enough and I'll never be enough, because it generalizes to the person.
My goodness. The mindset itself, again, as a coach as well, that's the hardest part, is to try to get through to people in regards to like what what we're learned, what we grow up on, what society tells us we should be doing. So there's so many things that work against. But the one thing that you're right. I mean, I think I put in my head too, I'm going to be rich one day too. And I think I'm 46, Shawn. I'm rich with life. That's what I get to, because that's the other mindset itself. It's not just about the money. It's always about the people, the friends, the love that we also accumulate in the years. But the hardest thing that, again, like scarcity or abundance, the mindset that's there, obviously it's not bad if you're one or the other, but what are some of the things that that you tell your clients that, when it comes to, like their mindset and, what they're coming into, coming into a session, or just, coming into is it bad? Is it good? What's your approach in regards to like kind of explaining to that someone who's learning their personalities for the first time?
Oh, okay. One of the things that I do is I ask them what their 4 top values are.
Okay.
Is it education? Is it recreation? Is it philanthropy? Whatever. Is it leisure? And they write down their top values. And we talk about that. And then I ask them about their spending and saving, just kind of the nuts and bolts of their situation. And then I try to relate it to what degree do you feel that you're living your values, and where are the money leaks, and where are you doing very well? If you believe in saving or philanthropy, you're making your contributions, you're doing those things, but maybe there's some places where you aren't. And I think to go back to a point that you brought up, there's so much societal pressure on being seen as competent financially. Nobody hangs out a sign saying, I'm a real jerk with my money, even though inside they may feel, I'm doing terribly with my money.
Right.
But the last thing in the world, they want to show that to the world. And what happens is, if they keep it to themselves and don't tell anybody, the sense of shame and being out of control just grows. And I know that when people say you're not alone, other people have this same sense of shame, which tends to constrict and further isolate people. So and leads to more and more distrust, which means that it's harder and harder to open up to people. And that's the barrier that I see that I have to somehow overcome to help people understand that if you feel the shame, it's your own sense of, I want something different from what I'm giving myself, and I don't know how to get it. And if I can translate their shame into a statement like that, that's more neutral, then they stop, hammering themselves.
Yeah.
And can have a little more compassion, as they would have for somebody else. But ultimately often not for themselves.
I mean, I tell people all the time, I think you're beating yourself up a little bit as they talk to me about their financial situation. So I guess where is the line between I goofed, it's normal to goof, I made a financial mistake, now I'm going to recover and move on versus I've got an issue that I really need to discover here and try to resolve.
Oh, that's a really good, yeah. A pat on the back only goes in so deep. And I think, you can start there and encourage somebody to forgive themselves. But then if they come back and they can't do it, then you have to take another tack that's not going to work. So you have to go deeper. You have to say, look, there's a real issue here that you have so out of habit condemned yourself or think badly of yourself because you got into this mess. And my encouraging you doesn't seem to be working. So what I would suggest is, when somebody gets into that state, where there's some kind of anxiety or depression, their vision narrows and all they can see is their own reality.
Yep.
And what you can do is to try to broaden their reality. So, okay, this is the way it is now, but 6 months from now, can you imagine what could be different? So you get them out of their immediate stuck. And if they continue, 6 months from now is probably going to get worse. Then they need to see somebody like me.
Right. Let me ask this one before we jump into the actual example that we had talked about itself. The social media obviously plays a huge part in how a lot of people consume information, even get validation in regards to money is one thing, but just in general, how social media. Have you seen in your findings, your research itself, what the impact of social media has been on this type of topic itself, and what damage or good or whatever it might have been or has been in regards to that?
Yeah, it's huge because there is so much pressure to look good. If you thought there was pressure to look good before, oh my gosh, now you've got audiences of millions. And the thing about social media that is so pernicious to me is that if you criticize, it goes everybody. Negativity and hate sell more than positivity and love in terms of numbers and volume.
Right.
You get somebody who gets annoyed and starts posting really negative stuff, then that travels, and that can really do horrible things to, really good content. And I think of all the YouTube tubes that I watch. I'm very much into wellness, and I listen to a lot of nutritional podcasts, as well as financial ones. And the discrepancies between one expert and another are so huge that, you walk away scratching your head in confusion, and nobody is trying to do anything bad. They just have very, very different beliefs. Now, if you take a YouTube that is destructive, or a Instagram or a TikTok that's destructive, it takes 5 positive responses to equal 1 negative criticism, and it's so unbalanced, and there's so much misinformation, not out of different theories, but just destructive misinformation and you don't know whether half the time at least with AI increasing, I don't know whether I'm talking to a person or a bot.
That's true. That's true as well, and I think a lot of it too is how people are feeling that day, and you don't know what goes viral. You think you're hoping good information, information that would be helpful is the stuff that goes viral out there itself. But sometimes the most deceiving or the most confusing information is what goes out there and seems to catch. Again, it depends on how it was delivered as well. So it's just fascinating. Again, you're the brain here, so it's kind of like it's amazing that we're still. This is all about how we interpret and perceive information.
George, are you trying to tell me that not everything on the internet is true?
Exactly. Well, that's a good warning. We should have a disclaimer there that says everything on the internet is or may not be
may not be true.
Factual.
Images are closer than they appear.
Well, one piece of advice that just came to mind that I remind myself of, because I can get on a high horse because I love what I do, but the most important thing is what somebody hears from what you say. And often when I have asked, I say, okay, I go on a rant and then I say, what did you hear? What are you going to take away from this? And sometimes I'm absolutely shocked at what's going to be taken away because it's not what I said. And that's a great thing for anybody, that Shawn, when your client is upset with themselves and you pat them on the shoulder and try to encourage more self-regard. If you said, okay, what did you hear me saying to you, and see what they come back with.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, you're optimistic because I'm paying you, so you probably don't really mean it. You didn't intend that, but that's what they may have heard.
Right.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting perspective, and I do try to think that I help people to legitimately help people. I mean, yeah, it's not lost on me that I make money from people that are having difficulty paying their debts, but no, that's an interesting perspective.
So what was the scenario itself? I think that's everybody. We've been teasing in regards to that kind of stuff itself now. So what is it that we need Shawn's expertise? We don't want to blow up his head a little bit either, but hey.
So technically I am also a doctor. I've got a doctorate in law. It's a Juris Doctorate degree. So technically I'm Dr. Yesner as well.
Oh my goodness. Expectations are going up and I'm going to start to stutter.
I will try not to.
Well, this is a case that one of my colleagues has, and the situation is that the husband and wife are both independent workers. They work in non-traditional jobs, so they don't make a whole lot of money, and they tend to avoid looking at their finances. But when the therapist came to consult with me, my first question when I saw that their debt was $700,000, had they ever considered bankruptcy in order to get a Chapter 7 fresh start. And so he just wrote me back this morning. So this is hot off the press. That the issue is that the loan, the debt is to his father-in-law, because his father-in-law took out a second mortgage in order to help support them. And if he doesn't pay them back on a regular basis, that is going to affect their future life, and he simply can't do that. But they are in such a panic that, that's why they consulted me.
Yeah, so the issue with a bankruptcy, I mean, you're right. A Chapter 7 does create a fresh start. It does give everybody the bankruptcy discharge. It gives them a fresh start. The first thing that came to my mind is, where are these people located? Because although a bankruptcy is governed by federal law, a bankruptcy in Florida is going to look a lot different than a bankruptcy in Pennsylvania. It's going to look a lot different than a bankruptcy in California, for example.
Yeah.
And even sometimes a bankruptcy in Tampa could look different, for example, than a bankruptcy in Miami. Even though both are in Florida, the Southern District of Florida may have slightly different local rules than the Middle District and the Tampa Division. But
Right.
a couple of things in relation to secured debt. So like a home equity line of credit, a lot of people, I've done episodes on this before. People say, I don't have a mortgage. I have a home equity line of credit. It's the same thing. It's a home equity line of credit on the house. A HELOC is a mortgage. It might be a second mortgage, but it's a mortgage. Typically with mortgage obligations, as long as the homeowners continue to pay on that mortgage, they would be able to keep the home. We had one of our local trustees here who retired years and years ago, but one of our local trustees here used to say, if you want to stay, you've got to pay. And so, even though you might have a first mortgage, second mortgage, homeowner association dues, car payments, whatever the case may be, if you want to keep that secured asset, you can in a bankruptcy so long as you continue making payments. The challenge that I think your borrower may have, or the person that you were talking about may have, depending on who the trustee is, the trustee may say, well, show me all the documents that prove that this debt from dad is a legitimate debt. Because debts to and from family members tend to be, at least here in Tampa, perceived more as gifts.
Oh.
And if it's a gift, then the trustee could say that debt against the house is not a secured debt. It's merely a gift. So now the house has a bunch of equity. And if you're in a place where there is no homestead exemption or a limited homestead exemption, you theoretically could lose the house. Dad's debt gets discharged, so it could create some issues for the trustee. There's also an issue of preferential payments. So the trustees don't like when you pay one creditor and not another. Why did you pay Visa and bankrupt American Express? And when it's a family member, when it's someone that's called an insider, the look back period is up to a year. So they could say, all the payments you've made to dad within the last year have to be recaptured from dad, because why would you pay dad back and not Visa, for example? So that's another issue that we might have to deal with in the bankruptcy case. The other kind of overriding issue, assuming that the clients do file the Chapter 7 and do get through it, and let's say worst case scenario, the trustee says the HELOC is not a debt against the home, and they say it's just a gift, or it's just something that we're going to discharge. Any discharged obligation can be repaid when the bankruptcy is over. It's just that the creditor can't demand payment. So the kids could choose to pay back dad, even if dad's debt gets discharged. But if they don't pay dad back, dad has no recourse to sue them, for example, and say, you need to pay me back the debt. But they could always choose. They could always say, yeah, sorry, dad, we had to list you because we had to list everybody. And then after the bankruptcy's over, they can say, well, we're going to continue to pay you back. And that wouldn't be a problem either. So, it's a hard question to answer because there's so many variables involved. But I guess the ultimate advice would be to have them talk to a bankruptcy attorney in their area, in their state, in their town, in their city, to really figure out, what laws apply in their area and how to navigate this thing. If they were in Florida, I would probably have to take a look at the line of credit and the validity of the line of credit, and then probably have a conversation with them and dad about, is this something that the trustee is going to go after?
And who is the trustee?
So the way the bankruptcy program works, it is governed by the United States Department of Justice. So the U.S. Department of Justice appoints a United States trustee in the various regions. The United States trustee then appoints the Chapter 7 and Chapter 13 trustees. Basically, the trustee's job is to look out for the creditors. The trustee's job is to marshal the assets and the money so that if there is any money to go back to the creditors, the trustee makes sure it's a an equitable distribution, a fair distribution to the creditors.
So that the trustee comes from a federal institution, but then appoints state people to carry out the job.
Yeah, local trustees. Yeah. So, for example, here in Tampa, most of our trustees are attorneys. We've had a couple of trustees that were CPAs, not necessarily attorneys, and they're literally appointed by the United States trustee. A lot of them are local, so typically what I would tell clients is the here in the Tampa Bay area, the trustees, they try to appoint trustees that are somewhat local. So, for example, I'm here in Clearwater. Chances are if somebody in Clearwater files a bankruptcy, somebody who lives in Clearwater files a bankruptcy, they're going to have a trustee that is at or near Clearwater, or one of the other towns is Palm Harbor. They're not, for example, if they're in Clearwater, they're not going to get a Tampa trustee, for example. They're not going to get a St. Petersburg trustee, for example. But they are assigned at random, so there's no way to tell that for certain.
Oh, very interesting.
So I hope I answered at least best I could. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, you've given me some ideas so that I can help counsel the psychologists working with them directly.
And like I said at the beginning of this episode, you and I are both in B&I. In fact, my seat in B&I is as the bankruptcy attorney, although I do some other areas of law. If this is a scenario where your colleague needs some legal help for their client, you can always go and look at the B&I resources and see what local bankruptcy attorneys, and if there are no local bankruptcy attorneys, I would say find an attorney in a local chapter, and they'll know a bankruptcy attorney that they can refer to.
That sounds like great advice, Shawn.
So I tend to have a nugget here or there from time to time.
That's a pretty shiny nugget.
Yeah, it is. I buffed it today. So anyway, as we kind of get to the end here, is there anything we didn't talk about? Anything you want to mention specifically?
Only that I would encourage people to realize that there are many, many people who struggle with money, that everybody has a hard time talking about it. As a matter of fact, there was a study done that showed that households have that as the number 6 topic that they talk about in an average month, because everybody knows that when they're confronted with money, some negative feelings are going to come up, and people are very uncomfortable with each other when that happens.
Yeah.
So I would encourage people to, seek resilience. If you have a money problem, you can get through it, and you can develop what's called financial resilience, where you have a much more open mind to possibilities, and you fix the problem. You may not fix it perfectly, but you do it better than you think you can.
Totally agree.
Yeah.
And again, good sage advice for folks itself. The thing that we always kind of tell folks, it is very hard to start the conversation, but it's good to be more aware of our situations and seeking the help when we feel like we even if it doesn't always have to feel like crisis, right? It's just more of like, I like to fine tune, or am I headed in the right direction, or do I have the right knowledge? I think all of those types of questions, as much as we'd like to say, social media, don't go there as the final, but seek out some support and help. There's plenty of support on that for sure.
Yes. And just last word, there was a survey done from Canada that showed that people who avoid dealing with their money have the lowest amount of financial resilience, which means that they're more subject to negativity and collapse than most other groups.
Oh, wow.
There you go. So Shawn, we've learned a lot. now you're in touch with your inner you,
There you
and
go.
making sure that we can kind of get the other stuff out there as well.
Absolutely. Well, Dr. Maggie Baker, thank you very much for being a guest on this week's episode. We really appreciate you being here. For people that want to contact you, it is Maggie at MaggieBakerPhD.com. That's also the website, MaggieBakerPhD.com. Also, take a look at the book, which is CrazyAboutMoney.net. If in your spare time, you can also go check out the Patreon page for the Crushing Debt podcast, which is patreon.com/crushingdebt. We've also got our social media channels. Give some love to Sam Cohen. Thank you again for being a sponsor. But Maggie, we really appreciate you being a guest on the show this week.
Well, I've had a great time, and I think you guys are really, you've got a wonderful subject, and I hope your listeners can take it in the way you mean it.
Yep, exactly.
Thank you.
Exactly.
Yeah. So with that, I think we're going to wrap up this week's episode. We do hope, check out CrazyAboutMoney.net and use what you've learned so that you have more money at the end of the month rather than month at the end of the money. And we will talk to you in next week's episode of the podcast.